my horror-loving dudes, I'm Killjoy Jake, and today we're going to be ranking all of the third acts in all 6 of the Scream movies. Before we get into the ranking, you should like this video and subscribe, if you want. That would make old Jake real happy over here. Alright, let's get into it.
Well, sometimes that is better.
One last thing before we get to the ranking, this is just my personal opinion on the third acts of all 6 of the Scream movies. Obviously, we're going to have a difference in opinion, so please leave me your thoughts on the third acts of the Scream films down in the comments below. Coming in last but not least is the third act of Scream 3. Scream 3 has a very absurd and silly third act that I really enjoy. I've really come to like this film and its third act for how ridiculous and goofy it is, and I have a fun time with it every single time. What is essentially the Army of Darkness of the Scream franchise, Scream 3 has a very silly and goofy tone to it that some of the other films maybe don't have. Some people really don't like that about Scream 3, but I've found some fun in it. I don't think it's the best Scream movie, not by a long shot, but it is still a good time. Another reason I compared it to Army of Darkness is we also have a main character here who is basically invincible, and it's a little ridiculous at times, but I have fun with it. Once again, it's all very fun, and that's important. If it was boring, it would suck, and Scream 3 is definitely not that. Sidney Prescott is so prepared for Ghostface this time around, she somehow anticipates that he's gonna make her use a metal detector on her leg. So what does she do? She has the gun on the inside of her ankle and somehow has 2 guns by the time the third act rolls around. She was super prepared for that. It's almost like how Ash Williams can shoot 3 shells out of a double-barrel shotgun. Very ridiculous, but also very fun to watch. Our singular killer in this film also teleports because spatial logic is out the window in this third act, which I think is great, and maybe one of the most funny things I've ever seen in the Scream films happens in this third act as well, when Ghostface throws a knife at Dewey's head and the butt of it hits him in the face. Dewey, we just love you so much. You're our special little boy. While all those things I find just really silly and comical, the one thing I really just dislike about the ending of Scream 3 is that Roman as a killer, his whole motive is it just doesn't do it for me. It's kind of the same thing from the last movie, just spun a little differently. It's once again a relative character, something this franchise is obsessed with doing with its killers in sequels. And I would argue that this is the most ridiculous one we've ever gotten. Where Mrs. Loomis was already a little ridiculous, it's the mom of the killer from the previous movie. This one is Sidney's brother that somehow she never knew about. You kind of just have to throw logic out the window to enjoy Scream 3, but like I said, it's definitely enjoyable. It's very dumb, but it's a really enjoyable film. I've never been a big fan of Roman personally. He just doesn't really do it for me here in this third act, especially with how goofy this whole movie is. To do something so serious here in the third act, it just doesn't really work. It clashes big time for me. I think the weirdest thing about Scream 3 overall is that it has some very serious tones to it, but then it's played very goofy at other times. Like, there's a whole commentary aspect on like Harvey Weinstein, John Milton. They make fun of him big time in this movie that's also very goofy and very like Hollywood. It feels like a kid's movie that takes place in Hollywood, like Scooby and the gang are going to Hollywood to solve a mystery or something. But then they have this like super serious dark commentary in there. It's very odd. I don't know if it works in this movie. I almost wish they would have played it a little more straight. I really like both of those things on their own, but they all kind of come together here in the third act, and it really clashes tone-wise for me. Coming in 5th place is Scream 2's third act, which is admittedly a lot better than I give it credit for. I like to rag on Scream 2 because I'm not necessarily a big fan of one of its killers, but I will say I think it has one of the coolest killers in the entire franchise and also one of the coolest motives. Mickey Altieri, or however you want to pronounce that last name, is in my opinion the most underrated Ghostface killer. The guy barely gets any screen time. He has one of the coolest motives, if not the coolest motive of any Ghostface killer, and well, just doesn't get a whole lot to do. All of Scream 2 has been this gigantic commentary on horror sequels, and then what a perfect way to cap it off by having your killer's motive be about blaming the movies for all the killings that are going on. I think that's such a perfect motive for the sequel to Scream, because if going back to the original Scream, why that works so well for Scream 2 is because you have Billy and Stu who say they watched a few movies to make their kills a little more creative. They learned a few things from that. So immediately after you're done watching the original Scream, you can make the argument, do horror movies create psychos, or is it the other way around? Scream 1 and 2 kind of inadvertently answer that question when you have, well, psycho killers, and then literally the first scene of Scream 2 is the movie premiere for the movie based off of Billy and Stu. I just wish that was the entire focus of the third act. I think the commentary is so slick in Scream 2, it's done so well, but they kind of whiff it here at the end by not making it the whole focus. Another thing I absolutely love about Scream 2's ending is the use of Cotton Weary's character. He's kind of like this red herring, but they don't just throw that out the window by the time we get to the third act. Cotton Weary actually does have some ulterior motives, and he's using Sidney Prescott to get that interview with Diane Sawyer. It's really refreshing to have a secondary antagonist in this film where we don't usually get that in some of the other Scream films. It's always just, Ghostface. Something I'm not the biggest fan of in Scream 2, though, is just Mrs. Loomis entirely. I think if she was completely removed from this film, you would have the best Scream film right here, right now. There's two big things about Mrs. Loomis I don't love. She's basically just Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th. It's the exact same thing. She's upset that her good boy died, and now she's getting revenge. The other thing I just don't love is she totally overshadows Mickey, and we could have done something super easy here, where she was just Mickey's accomplice, and Mickey was the prime, focal point of this entire third act. But instead they make her the lead killer, and it just makes me scratch my head every single time I watch it. I imagine if Scream 2 wasn't plagued with production issues just like Scream 3 was, we would get a better product here in the end, but ultimately, I just don't love everything that's going on in this third act. But with that being said, this film is seething with potential, and it could have been the very best Scream film out of all of them. But at the end of the day, I still love all of these movies, warts and all. Coming in fourth place is Scream 6's third act. This is honestly kind of an underdog on this list, I will say. Scream 6's third act has been criticized for many things. The biggest one that I actually do really agree with is Dermot Mulroney's character is so obvious from the get-go, pretty much the entire movie. They also repeated almost the exact same twist from a movie called Spiral from the Book of Saw, that is the 9th entry in the Saw franchise, that was also criticized for not having a good twist. So why would you do that? Now that's probably my least favorite thing about Scream 6's third act, but it's super brutal and I think easily features the coolest setting for any of these third acts out of all of them. We are in the Shrine of Ghostface, one of the most iconic set pieces in this entire franchise. There's so many little references and Easter eggs and things that even come back to kill some of our killers. One of my favorite moments from Scream 6 comes when Kirby pushes the same TV that killed Stu Macher all the way back in 1996 onto Ethan's head, and that kills him. I know I've made this joke before, but I'm gonna do it again. That TV's got a higher kill count than Ethan does. Pretty funny. Speaking of Ethan, I actually really like that Jenna Ortega gets to stab old Ethan in the mouth and telling him that he's gonna die a virgin. You're not sticking nothing in Tara, buddy. We're protecting her at all costs. I also just love Melissa Barrera in the role of Sam Carpenter. I think she kills it here at the end, stabbing the ever-loving out of Dermot Mulroney's character. Scream 6's third act is very flawed, but it's easily one of the most fun endings to any of these films, well, ever. You get that Demi Lovato song at the end too, Chad is alive. I like all of these things personally. Ooh, I'm really stirring the pot with that Chad comment, but anyways, let's move on. Taking the bronze medal is going to be Scream 5's third act. One of the two reasons I put this third act up so high is because Amber's reveal might be the very best in Scream history. Just out of nowhere, shooting Liv in the face, being like, I know, bam! What? That is easily one of the most shocking moments in any of these films across the board. That blew my mind when we saw that. Now, while I feel Amber's reveal is maybe one of the best in Scream history, I kind of feel the opposite about Richie's reveal. He is blatantly obvious from the get-go. I pretty much knew he was the killer from the very beginning of the movie. He's Jack Quaid, too. He's way too cute to trust. Another thing that I just don't think makes sense, and they could have just made this a little smoother, cut out maybe 5 minutes of the movie, is just have, Richie reveal himself right there next to Amber. You're not gonna get better than Amber shooting Liv in the face out of nowhere. You're not gonna get a better reveal than that. So why even try? Just have Richie go walk over to Amber and be like, get f***ed, Sam. The whole thing with Richie trying to convince Sam that Tara's the killer doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, Tara's been in a hospital bed this entire movie. She's literally the first victim in the film. There's no way Sam would have ever bought that. Amber and Richie get two of the most creative killer deaths we've ever seen in the Scream films. Gail and Sydney light Amber on fire with hand sanitizer, which is overkill, and I love that. And then Richie just gets the shit stabbed out of him. She is so vicious in both the third acts of Scream 5 and Scream 6. I just love her performance here, and I hopefully would love to see her become the killer one day. But in a good way, not there's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do it, in my opinion. Don't make her motive be oh, my mental health has taken me down this crazy route or whatever, and now I want to kill people. That would suck. That would be so terrible. Don't do that. But if Sam wants to become a ghost face herself and take out other of those creepy little incels on the stab Reddits, that would be pretty cool, and would make for a killer movie in my opinion. Fingers crossed for Scream 7, baby. Taking the silver medal will be the third act of Scream 4. Besides the hospital scene that feels so tacked on last minute because it was, everything else about this is fantastic. I think what I love so much about Jill's reveal is that it's not only super shocking, it's also very upsetting. Most of the Scream sequels feature killers who are relatives to other characters in the franchise. And this time we get Sidney Prescott's niece, Jill Roberts, as the killer. This works for me so much for all the reasons why Roman doesn't work for me as a killer, because Jill and Sidney had this relationship beforehand. Like when Jill and Sidney first meet up in the movie, Jill's all like, oh, Sidney's here. Like, oh, I love you so much, Sidney. You know, we're like girlfriends. This is great. But then you get the reveal that Jill is a killer. And honestly, this may be one of the darkest endings we've ever gotten to a Scream film, and originally it was even darker. Jill was wheeled away as our hero at the end of the film, and there was no hospital scene where she just dies. That would have been like my favorite third act to any Scream film ever if they had gone that route. That is so cool, man. Your boy loves him a good tragedy. But besides that, there's a lot more to love in Scream 4's third act. We also get this sequence with Jill Roberts where she's mutilating herself to seem like she was a victim in this crime scene. She runs straight into a picture, glass shatters everywhere, she's ripping her own hair out. Jill Roberts is crazy, man. It's Emma Roberts' amazing performance here that really makes Scream 4's third act one of my all-time favorites. Jill is easily the most evil, lemon-scented ghost face out of the entire bunch, and we love her. Kirby Reed survives this third act, which is pretty cool. Charlie Walker's reveal is, it's serviceable. And we also get maybe one of the best performances from Sidney Prescott in the ending of this film as well. And taking the gold is, of course, the third act of Scream 1996. While I think the Scream franchise can go on forever because of how interesting its concept is, nothing will ever top the third act and reveals of the original movie. They made Billy Loomis's character so obvious in the film so all your attention was drawn to him, but then when two killers come out at the end of the film, it's super shocking. You didn't see that coming. You never see two killers at the same time in the movie, so when Stu gets revealed as well, you're like, what? Speaking of chaotic and crazy things, we also get Billy and Stu stabbing each other in the gut like multiple times to make it seem like, once again, they were victims in this situation. I just think that's really scary to me. Like, this is a display of how crazy these characters have become, and it's gotta be one of the scariest moments in the entire franchise across the board. I love it, man. He's like, you cut too deep. I'm feeling kind of woozy here, man. Stu Macher is also my absolute favorite Ghostface killer. I think Matthew Lillard's performance here is unmatched by anyone else in the franchise. He's truly killing it in this entire sequence. Fun fact, Neve Campbell really stabbed Skeet Ulrich with that umbrella in that one scene. That's why you see Billy Loomis, not even acting in that sequence. He's just screaming in pain for real. It's kind of funny to think that one of the most iconic final girls of all time doesn't have very good aim in real life. Everybody gets to shine in this third act. They all have a little moment. If it's Sidney shooting Billy in the head again right at the end, which is awesome. Gale Weathers coming back to life to kind of save the day a little bit. Jamie Kennedy gets some good licks in there. I once again just have to say I think Matthew Lillard steals the show at the end of this with some very iconic lines that I still quote to myself all the time. That was fun. Oh my God, I love him so much. He's just a little, I just want to squish his cheeks. I like him. Overall though, I love this entire franchise and all their third acts. I think they're all fun for totally different reasons. I wouldn't call any of them inherently bad. How would you rank all 6 of the third acts so far though? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this third act ranking videos of the Scream franchise. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see this channel grow. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.